Hey, Everything 90s fam. Welcome back to another nostalgic trip down 90s memory lane. For today's episode, we are talking about horror movies. Thank you so much for your participation and continued support so far throughout the series. I greatly appreciate it. If this is your first time listening, I'm your host, Shalina. I created Everything 90s podcast for folks who grew up in the 1990s like me, and in each episode, I take you on a nostalgic trip down 90s memory lane. And one of my favorite parts of podcasting is connecting with you all. So whether you're a longtime listener or just joining us for the first time, I'd love to chat with you at Club 90s, the official Everything 90s fan club. You could find the link to join in today's show notes. So today I want to welcome returning guest Claire from Why the Flick podcast. She will be representing Team 90s. Welcome, Claire.
Hi, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Thank you. And if you're new to the show, Claire is, as I mentioned, the host of Why the Flick. It's a bi-weekly podcast that watches a new movie each episode and asks the question, why the flick did we watch this? And I want to welcome new guest, Mark. Welcome, Mark. He will be representing Team 2000s.
Right. Although I do love the 90s as well. So, we'll see who wins. We'll see what happens.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And Mark is a podcaster, a filmmaker, casting director, acting coach, producer, and writer, and video editor. And he hosts.
It's too much.
Yeah, that's great. It's great. Really, it goes in theme. It goes well with today's theme. So he hosts and produces the podcast Release Date Rewind podcast, which celebrates milestone anniversaries in film and TV. Mm-hmm. So both movie podcasters in today's episode.
Yes.
Yeah. Gotta represent.
Movie nerds.
Yes.
Here we are.
Yeah.
All right. So let's begin the games. So I will just review for any new listeners that aren't familiar with how the 90s versus 2000s works. So this is a series where the two decades go head to head in a friendly battle to determine which one gave us the best in a given category. For each category, there are two contenders. So as I mentioned, Team 90s is Claire. She'll be representing horror movies from the 90s, and Team 2000s is Mark, representing horror movies from the 2000s. And they will try to convince you, the listener, why their decade gave us the best horror movies. So there are 5 rounds where they will present their arguments, and after each round is what's called a free period, and this is where they will have the opportunity to respond to each other's arguments. And listeners, you are a huge role in the series. You have 1 week to vote for the decade you think won the battle based on the selections that they bring forth. And at the end of the week, the decade with the most votes will be crowned the winner. All right, let's begin the battle.
Woo. All right, let's do it. Horror fans and aficionados, I'm here today representing the best decade of horror movies, Team 90s. I say it's the best because it is a fact that the 90s both revolutionized and revitalized the horror genre. From slashers to thrillers to creature features, the 90s seriously had a heavy hitter in every subgenre. This decade gave us some of the most iconic Scream Kings and Scream Queens, plus legendary horror directors. And today I'm going to present you with my 5 best of the best picks. But I'll be honest, it was a struggle to narrow down this list because from 1990 to 1999, there were so many wonderful horror movies that came out. And personally, for me, that's a good problem to have. I had a lot to choose from. So listeners, I implore you to just remember where we've come from, how far we've come from, where we've been, because the fact of the matter is this: the influence of the 90s on the horror genre can be seen even to this day. Thank you.
It's hard to follow that. I love the 90s as well, Claire, so I am right there with you. But everybody, the 90s were amazing. We know that in multiple genres, but horror was amazing. But the 2000s took that amazingness and ran with it, and horror dominated the 2000s. Yes, we'll get into it. There were a lot of remakes in that decade, but that was only because horror was so huge, and it's become even more huge all these years later. So thank you, 90s. But in the 2000s, horror was being talked about everywhere. Like, depending on how old you were, we were talking about it at school. I mean, these movies were number one at the box office. There were no underground. I mean, there were underground horror movies, but these big movies were number one, talk of the town. So it took the 90s success and it ran with it. And it totally just reinvigorated the genre. For better or worse, we had all kinds of subgenres really killing it, at the box office. And also, I have to just shout out major influx in foreign and international horror, and major awareness of that wasn't, as people weren't as aware of the international horror films that were being made at the time, in the 80s and 90s. But the 2000s, people really became super aware of what was going on worldwide in this genre. So just have to say it was like sort of like horror on steroids, I think. So that's 2000s.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Both strong opening statements for both teams. So let's head into round one. So, Team 90s, what is your first pick?
Okay, so I'm going to start with a heavy hitter just right off the bat. I mean, all of my picks personally, I feel like are heavy hitters, but this is like top tier heavy hitter. Because this, as I mentioned, horror movies in the 90s were revitalizing genres. This one revitalized the slasher and created one of the most successful horror franchises that we know and love today. It is Scream, released in 1996. It is directed by horror legend Wes Craven of A Nightmare on Elm Street fame. And yeah, not only did this movie rewrite the slasher genre, it rewrote the horror genre just in general. The cultural impact of this film is it's astonishing. Prior to Scream, there was this very well-known standard that people in a horror movie did not know that they were in a horror movie. But Scream broke that rule with the iconic line of "What's your favorite scary movie?" Broke down all of those barriers, said, "Hey, we know, we're self-aware." Not only did it make references to other horror movies, but it made direct references to horror tropes, and then took those tropes and turned them on their heads. It has a very stacked cast. I mean, Scream Queen Neve Campbell herself has basically continued this franchise to this day. And then we also have Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Skeet Ulrich, Matthew Lillard, and Drew Barrymore. And speaking of Drew Barrymore, it has one of the most iconic openings of any horror movie with the twist death of Casey. It also gave us the idea that there can be not one, but two killers in the movie. And also, last but not least, it added a new horror villain to the big three, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, but we also got Ghostface. And what more can you say there?
Starting with the heavy hitter. Team
I had to go-
2000. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta go big. I'm giddy over here. I'm like, yep. And listen, I love Scream so much. I talk about it way too much, and I made a Scream fan film a few years ago that's still one of the most popular things I've made. Actually, I think on YouTube it is. So I am right there with you, Claire. But yes, Scream is absolutely amazing. Another heavy hitter that came out in the 2000s that gave us a whole new, insane, very popular, hugely popular franchise, Saw. Saw came out in 2004, just celebrated 20 years. I didn't talk about it on my show, but I talked about it on a friend's show. So I was like, okay, we'll talk about it on your show. But Saw came out of the gate and stunned audiences. Similar to Scream, but this really entered the zeitgeist quickly. Whereas Scream and some 90s horror took a little bit of time, to really get the buzz. Saw, I remember seeing it opening weekend. It was terrifying. It was shocking. The twist ending, I won't spoil anything, but major twists. And it gave us a whole new killer to enter the pantheon of slashers that Claire was just mentioning. It gave us Jigsaw and a whole new catchphrase, do you want to play a game? And actually this kind of goes hand in hand with Scream, because he was playing games on the phone, and now Jigsaw's playing games, with you like tied up with all sorts of contraptions about to kill you, right? But it was very inventive, very clever, directed by James Wan, who now we know has become a juggernaut in not only horror but also in action adventure. I mean, the guy is unstoppable, but this really kickstarted his career. The cast is very interesting. We got Carrie Elwes back, we have writer star Lee Wannell, Monica Potter, Danny Glover. What? Like, it was small and gritty, but it got some really interesting talent attached. And like I said, we now had an instantly iconic killer, a look, the doll, the like pig mask with the hair. I mean, it is just so scary, so brutal. And this, of course, created the whole subgenre torture porn. Maybe not created, but at least really made everyone aware of torture porn between this and Saw. So this ignited a whole new franchise, and the next year we got Saw 2, the year after that Saw 3. I don't even know how many. It was Saw X, I think we just had was the last one. So
is that
10,
right?
10?
Maybe,
There's 10? My gosh.
at least, at least 10. I know there were some
10.
offshoots, Spiral, so I don't even know anymore. But yeah, I mean, intense. So I have to just give some love to a heavy hitter called Saw.
All right, well done for
I'll
round
be
one.
honest, I've never seen Saw, but I know of Saw. Like, I know the story. I think it's because I know. Sorry, that might give me a ding, but it's because I'm not into, as you mentioned, torture porn as much. I think that's my least favorite.
It's hard to watch for sure.
Yeah,
but the original, I think you could totally handle. It's gross, but it is so scary. I hope I didn't say too much because I'm trying to be careful with any spoilers, but it will make your jaw drop in good ways, not only from the violence. But I hear you. It's some of the sequels, oof, I gotta turn it off. I'm like, this is insane.
Too much. Yeah, I know the sequels get crazy and outlandish. I do feel like Scream though has pretty good consistency across the franchise.
Totally,
versus Saw. It seems, from what I've heard anyway, it's a little up and down.
Oh yeah. Screams is always very consistent, but people like my husband, like different people I've talked to, and again, I'm a Scream fan, but the more people I talk to about horror, they're like, Scream isn't really that scary though. Like, give me something scary. And Saw truly terrifies people, because what happens when you are kind of doing something wrong? We have a killer that usually goes after people who are maybe not doing the best thing. And all of a sudden you wake up and you're tied up and you've got this thing on you, and you only have a few minutes to hopefully do something correct, or else you die. So just got to give some love to Saw.
Awesome. Well, for me, I think Saw was the first horror film I've watched. Not willingly, though. This came out when I was in high school. Or I became aware of it when I was in high school.
So Shalina, you didn't see a horror movie until high school?
Yeah, I was never into... Like, I never seen Scream. I know I'm a 90s podcast, but...
Wait, Shalina, you've never seen Scream?
Never seen Scream. No.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my god.
I know it's
we've got to stop
popular.
this right now.
I was going to say the same thing.
Shalina's got to go watch Scream and then we'll come back, guys.
Let's resume after Thanksgiving.
I know it's about.
Check it out. It's great.
I was never in, still am never into, was never into horror movies, still not into horror movies. But this was a listener's choice to do this category for this series. So I'm like, hey, why not? But yeah, I think Saw 2 I saw before the first one with one of my friends. She forced me to watch it, and it was crazy. But it was very interesting. Like, the killer's motive is very interesting, though. I'll just keep it at that. I was like, okay. But yeah.
You know what? Other killer's motive is very interesting. Ghostface in Scream.
Ghostface.
Just saying.
Ghostface, iconic for sure. Like, I'm a teacher, and Halloween just passed, and a few students had Ghostface as their costume. So
I was one of them back in the day. I was totally Ghostface. I had a Halloween party the year after Scream came out, and I showed everyone Scream, and at the time I was what, 7th grade maybe. I mean, we were young, and so many of my friends hadn't seen it, and I just felt so cool. I'm like, you're gonna watch this movie I love. Let me take off my mask. We're gonna press play, get the pizza ready. So, oh yeah,
Love that. All right. So yeah, I'll watch Scream
do it.
before this episode comes out. All right. So let's head into round 2. So this time, Team 2000s, you are first. What's your pick?
Okay, thank you very much. All right, round 2. Like I mentioned in kind of my overall statement, the 2000s, the aughts were really kind of bombarded by a lot of horror remakes because it was so popular. And I think one of the very best remakes of that decade and of any horror decade is The Ring. The Ring was and is huge. I mean, like I was saying earlier, movies that everyone at school was talking about, The Ring, I remember thinking, wow, this is a big deal for people like Shalina, who maybe like didn't love horror, to be saying, oh my God, I saw it opening weekend and I was crying and I had to leave. I was like, wow, like this has entered pop culture like icon status already. So The Ring, I'm sure many listeners have at least heard of it. It is such a great movie. The look, the visuals, the makeup. I mean, we have another brand new villain, Samara, this little girl with her long dark hair. Obviously, it's remade from the Asian film Ringu, which was very popular. But The Ring really catapulted Naomi Watts to like superstardom. The year before, she did Mulholland Drive, David Lynch, which was a big deal, but still a little more niche. This was like number one, at least for a couple weeks, in October 2002, directed by Gore Verbinski. And it is so spooky and it takes its time, but it is thrilling from start to finish. Claire brought up Casey's opening and Scream, an iconic opening, and I think The Ring. I'm an acting coach, like Shalina said, so sometimes we do horror scenes in class for teens or adults, and I've done both scenes in class, but The Ring opening scene with these two girls just watching TV, talking about boys, and the phone rings, ooh, it is so much fun. So I love it so much, and the editing is amazing. The color correction, like I said, the way it looks, it haunts you, and it's a great ending. And it did lead to a franchise. The sequels aren't so, loved, but at least that first film, A plus plus plus. So I have to say, The Ring is my second choice.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have to agree. I mean, I do love The Ring. I don't know. The Ring has certainly terrified me.
Yeah.
I don't think I've revisited it in a very long time
Ooh.
because of how much it scared me. So
Yeah.
I have to concur that The Ring is definitely up there in terms of horror.
For sure.
Okay, so for my round 2 pick, in round 1, I established that Scream was very popular among audiences. But for my second pick, I wanted to also establish that critics love horror too, very much so. And I think it's no secret that horror movies are often wrongly overlooked by elite film community for not having that it factor that makes them award worthy.
Amen.
But then a little film came along in 1991 and said, we'll see about that. And that movie was Silence of the Lambs.
Wow.
I know, I'm just going
Okay,
to pause
all
for
right.
dramatic effect.
Claire's really bringing out the big guns. Okay, roll up my sleeves.
To this day, it is the first and only horror movie to win Best Picture at the Oscars. It is the third film. Yes, I know. Shalina was like, oh my gosh, her face.
Yeah, I was like, whoa.
It's the third film in Academy history to win the Big Five, which means Best Actor and Actress, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Picture. It was also nominated for Best Sound and Best Film Editing. So it basically swept the awards and proved that the horror genre can be taken seriously. And I think it is still one of the best crime thriller horror movies out there. It gave us the dynamic horror duo of Jodie Foster as Clarice Starling and Sir Anthony Hopkins as cannibal psychopath Hannibal Lecter. Amazing, stunning, beautiful. So many quotable moments as well. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. Classic. Also, it puts the lotion in the basket.
Oh,
quoted
God.
often. So many good quotes. Yeah, it's just a film that is revered and really has not been replicated since, as proven by its Oscar wins. So yeah, I think this one just proved that horror can be taken seriously amongst film critics and the film community.
Absolutely. Great point.
Hey,
Yeah.
wow.
Wow. Jeez, took my breath away. All right.
Whew.
Free period. Both great picks. I'll let you guys go first and then I'll put my 2
Well,
cents in.
speaking to The Ring, I'll say that, like I mentioned, scariest movie I think I've ever seen. I remember it's like seared into my brain, that movie, because I watched it with my dad at home. And, you know, it's like one of those movies where the dad's like, yeah, I'll let you watch a scary movie. I was very too young to be watching this at the time. But we watched it, and my dad thought it was over, so he left the house. And I won't spoil it, but the movie was not over, and I was left home alone for the end of the movie. And I think I was pretty much traumatized for like a good month after that. So
Yeah.
it's definitely horrifying. Equally horrifying, maybe, as, you know, Silence of the Lambs, where
I think so. Oh,
people
Silence
are
is
being
very, I mean, Silence is very scary. It's a drama, you know, some people might think it's a little slow, but man, that movie is disturbing. It takes its time. Great actors, like you said. Yeah, nothing bad to say. If anyone has anything bad to say about Silence of the Lambs, don't trust them. Just walk away. Just leave them behind.
leave,
right?
immediately leave.
I mean, you got Buffalo Bill, like Claire was saying. You have Hannibal. You also, I mean, I know I'm like rooting for the wrong team here, but I love the shots in Silence of the Lambs where a lot of the characters were directed by Jonathan Demme to look into the camera to make the audience feel uncomfortable, much like Clarice, Jodie Foster, would feel uncomfortable as one of the few women in this field, you know, which is a brilliant touch. I mean, like, it's so unsettling, and what a great ending. Oh my God. But yeah, you know, and speaking of quotes, like Claire was saying, some great silence quotes. How could I forget to whisper in everyone's ear, 7 days? Everyone was saying that to each other. I want to say I was maybe a sophomore or so in high school when that came out. So everyone was just going around saying 7 days, you know? And then of course it was spoofed in Scary Movie 3 by the great Anna Faris and, oh gosh, why am I blanking on her name? Brenda. Don't tell me.
Regina Hall.
Regina Hall. Oh my God,
sorry.
thank you. Oh my, right? Jeez. Sorry, everyone. Queen. But, you know, just iconic, quotable, really spooky. You watch a video, a random videotape, which by that time, of course, you guys know, like by 2002, 2003, who had VHS players anymore? I mean, maybe like in the basement, DVD was king. So to have an unmarked VHS tape, something that like everyone kind of knew, you know, by that age, of course, but like it's trash now. But this makes its way around, and now like is basically poisoning you. You know, now you have this illness, this disease, and the clock starts ticking. Brilliant. Oh my God, it's so spooky. And there have been a lot of movies like that where, you know, you catch something, like Smile is a new one that's very similar, where if you look at someone who's got it and smiles at you, now you have it, you know, and it follows. But The Ring is pretty untouchable. There are very few things to critique with The Ring, you know. So good. So many beautiful shots, really haunting stuff. So both are good. I don't know, Shalina, what do you think? Have you seen either? I hope you have.
So going back to my first statement, I didn't watch horror until high school, and I was in the early 2000s in high school. I did see The Ring. I don't remember much from it because I was forced to watch it by my friends.
This seems to be a reoccurring theme.
Yes. Yeah, I don't. Is this the one where she comes out of a well, or is that The Grudge?
Yep, The Well.
Yep.
Yeah, The Grudge is another huge popular remake around that time, but
okay, I think I mixed those two up.
I think a lot of people do because they both have the long, dark,
creepy
black
hair with hair.
The Well. I mean, that well is so wells already are kind of like spooky, and then now it's like, oh my God, you know.
Yeah. The Silence of the Lambs. Heard of it. Have not seen it.
I think you could totally watch it.
Yeah.
Like it certainly is horror and scary, but it's also so riveting to watch.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. It's a great like crime thriller, ultimately.
Yeah.
You know,
okay.
It just has some really, you know, dark, twisted, you know, stuff for sure. Check it out, Shalina. That is a true That's an American classic. I mean, so is
Yeah.
Okay.
the remake, but but Silence, whoa. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, noted.
Top tier.
Noted. Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely not by myself though. I'll definitely check out these
Yeah.
ones that I haven't seen for the listeners. Maybe I'll do like a watch party or something with
There you
listeners.
go.
But
Yeah.
yeah. I think I said this already, but like I picked this category because it was one that the listeners wanted to hear.
Right.
Sorry
So
if
you're like,
my
okay,
knowledge
fine.
on 90s. No. This is fun because I'm learning more about 90s pop culture through Claire's pick. So this is
Yeah.
good homework for me.
Oh yeah.
Actually,
And
I'll tell you. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna say, if you ever want Claire and me on to talk about any of Claire's '90s picks, like we could probably spend a whole like 2 hours
Yeah.
on each movie.
And vice
Okay,
versa with
hey,
Right?
let's do that
2000s
then.
picks. Yeah.
Let's do that
Right?
then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another episode on my podcast, we'll watch a 90s horror movie and then
There you
we'll deep dive
Yeah.
into it. Okay, I'm excited. Okay.
I was just gonna say I was very much like you, Shalina. Like years ago, I did not watch any horror movies, and then I'd say like 3 or 4 years ago, I had what I call my horror renaissance, and I was like, I'm gonna watch horror more, and
Wow.
I
love
love it
that.
so much.
I'm so glad you're a horror
Wow,
late bloomer.
okay.
I have a lot of friends like that.
Yeah.
And I've said this a lot on my show, and it's actually my latest episode is about A Nightmare on Elm Street. If you ever do 80s horror, that's one of the
Yes.
greatest picks. But I was Freddy for Halloween when I was 6 years old, and the neighbors
Oh my gosh.
were freaked out. My dad was like, "It's a movie, it's fine." So I saw that way too young, but I mean, it's
Dang.
iconic. So you're talking to someone who, I mean, I'm now turning 38 in a few months. So I mean, I've been watching horror for decades. So yeah, you're speaking my language.
You're never
this
too
going.
old to get into it, though.
Oh, no.
I mean,
Oh,
the
yeah.
horror community will welcome you with open arms.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And better late than never. Although,
Yeah.
you know, it's hard with some of these iconic ones where you might have seen a spoiler or like you might have heard
true.
or seen the ending, you know. So that's tough. But just if you see that, just kind of block it off and, you know,
Yeah.
revisit sometime, you know.
All right, noted. Thank you for the support too and non-judgment.
Of course. No judgment
Yeah.
here.
Uh-uh.
Never.
All right, so now we are heading into round 3, and this time, Claire, you could go first.
All right. So the 90s gave us very iconic Scream queens and kings, as I've mentioned. Neve Campbell from Scream. Love her. But it also gave us one of the most legendary horror directors ever, M. Night Shyamalan. And, you know, for better or worse, with his career, you can't deny that he has had such an incredible impact on the horror genre. And what 90s movie, pray tell, did he direct that gave him his big break? That's right. It was The Sixth Sense, released in 1999.
Yep.
Snaps.
Biggie. That's a biggie.
Yeah. Now, I will say this. A box office score does not maketh always a good movie, but
Right.
the numbers don't lie in this case because this movie stayed number 1 at the box office for 6 straight weeks and spent 17 consecutive weeks in the top 10 spot. It grossed an astronomical $672 million worldwide, and it held that highest grossing title for a horror movie until the release of It in 2017, the remake It. So stayed up there for an incredibly long time. And also was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. Just throw that in there. It also has a very incredible cast. You've got Bruce Willis, you've got Haley Joel Osment, and Toni Collette, who is a Scream queen in of in herself because of Hereditary. She's lovely. Great performance in this movie. It has another famous movie quote, "I see dead people." Everybody attributes that quote with this movie. It also has very horrifying visuals. Some of the most terrifying things I've seen. There's a lot of scary looking ghosts. There's a ghost girl at one point under a bed who vomits. There's
Ooh.
the part. Shelley's just like,
Misha Barton.
okay.
Oh, snap.
Yep.
I was
Played
not
by
expecting that.
a young Misha Barton before she was on the OC, right?
Mm,
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
yeah. So there's that. There's hanging ghosts. There's at one point Cole, who is played by Haley Joel Osment, he gets locked in a room by himself with a ghost, and it's very terrifying for the few seconds that he experiences that. And let's not forget, it has one of the most shocking twist endings of any movie ever created. I don't know if I should reveal it because now I feel like I don't want to spoil anything.
Maybe not. Shalina, have
Maybe
you
I
seen
should
it?
just leave it at that.
I think I know what it is because I remember in elementary school friends talking about it. Is it related to the Haley character?
Somewhat, yes. And
Okay.
Bruce Willis's character.
Okay, never mind. No, maybe I don't know it.
Okay. I'll
don't
leave it at that. I won't say anything because I don't want to ruin it. But it is like one of the greatest twist endings ever. It may not have started the twist ending, but it certainly perfected it and shocked audiences. So that's my round 3 pick, The Sixth Sense.
Okay, nice. Nice
Claire's
one.
she is just firing on all cylinders here. Wow. Yeah, that's an iconic one. Okay. Should I go, Shalina? My turn?
Yes, your turn.
Okay, round 3. So it's funny that Claire brings up The Sixth Sense, which is absolutely iconic. I agree. And I almost was going to talk about The Others, which is another iconic ghost
God, I
movie
love
with
that
a
movie.
major twist with Nicole Kidman. Love it. Highly recommend. But I thought, I think I can do something else. So this one isn't ghost themed. This is a very straightforward, simple, basic in a great way horror movie that haunts everyone who sees it. And this movie is The Strangers, starring Liv Tyler, Scott Speedman. It also has created a franchise of its own. But The Strangers came out in 2008, written and directed by Brian Bertino. It is absolutely intense, horrifying, thrilling. It is so tense, basically from start to finish. You really get to, it's a slow burn. You get to really meet this couple who are staying at this, quiet house in the woods. I believe it is Scott Speedman's character's like kind of family home. They're in the area for a wedding, and it's late at night, and these strangers just show up, and there's a knock at the door, and a famous line, which is sort of silly, but it's famous, at least within the horror community, is Tamara home? And they're like, who's Tamara? And they say it in every movie. And we still don't know who Tamara is. But they have these creepy masks. There's a guy with a bag over his head. There's a blonde girl with a like kind of doll face, and then a dark-haired woman with another kind of pin-up doll face mask, and they are terrorizing this couple. It is unsettling. It never lets up, and it is grim. No real twist ending, but it really packs a punch. And this was sort of elevated horror because it's violent, of course. It is scary, but it's not really like your typical slasher where there's a bunch of people kind of being stupid and dying. It is true survival horror. And it is so intense. And I just remember my palms were sweating seeing this in the theater. Opened the same day as the Sex and the City movie, randomly. Counter programming. I'm like, which do I see? I'll see both. And 2 very different movies, right? But yeah, and Liv Tyler, a new Scream Queen. And I wish she did the sequels because, man, the scream on that girl. She really gave it. But I just love The Strangers. And I know a lot of people did. It is truly scary. So I got to give some love to The Strangers from 2008.
I've actually never heard of that one.
What?
Before.
Shalina.
Yeah,
Oh
I know.
Okay.
Sorry, The Strangers.
That's a
yeah.
biggie.
I've heard of
I've
The
heard
of that one,
Others,
Claire?
but not that.
Oh yeah, The Others. Yeah. Have
Yes.
you have
my
you
God,
seen The
I love
Strangers,
The Others.
Claire?
I haven't. I know.
wow.
Don't
Okay.
come at me.
Okay.
I think it's because again, Home Invasion is one of those where it's almost too real. It's too scary to dive into.
Yeah, this one is so real.
I know a lot of people do love these movies. Yeah.
Check it out sometime when you really are feeling brave, because man, it's just you're right. I mean, it's so scary because it can happen, and it's totally at random, and it's just it's just haunting and horrifying. So yeah, I agree. But The Sixth Sense,
I've seen the visuals of it of
Oh,
Liv
yeah.
Tyler standing in a room and you see a figure kind
Yes.
of hidden in the background, and I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, that really gets me.
Yes, and what's so amazing about it is it's so quiet. Like there are moments, and I love that. I think sometimes I love most horror, any horror, let's watch it. But a lot of horror can really go heavy on the music, on the score, where it's kind of forcing you to feel away. The Strangers, the score sometimes is just so minimal. It just sounds like room tone. and all of a sudden you have no idea, like, oh my God. And it's not a big, like, it's very quiet when it really wants to scare you. So yeah, gotta give it some love. But The Sixth Sense is absolutely amazing. And going back to my acting classes, I love pulling scenes from that. Especially, there's a beautiful scene, Claire, with Toni Collette and Haley Joel Osment in the car.
Yeah.
My God, that dialogue. I could do it every day. I'm just like, all right, I'll
It'll
play
make
Toni.
me cry right now just thinking of it.
Yeah, it's so good. It's a really emotional horror film. It's sad. There's a lot of sadness. Yeah, it's so good. I have to give it to The Sixth Sense as well. Two very different horror movies on that round.
Yeah.
Right?
Two very different.
I don't know if I want to watch Strangers, but I'll give The Sixth Sense. I'll try. Yeah, I was looking at the image. Can I? I'm looking at the photos too.
Shalina, we'll do it together.
Okay.
We'll do it together.
Yeah.
Okay.
What could be so funny, Shalina, is you could have like a follow-up episode of all these movies you haven't seen, and based on what we are saying, and you just go down the list and you're like, yeah, that wasn't for me. I don't like that.
It's a great idea. Great content idea.
Right?
For
How
sure.
long will Shalina last in this movie before turning it off? Right?
Right.
And my listeners can make some predictions.
Right?
All right. So next is round 4. We're almost at the end here. With Teen 2000s, their first pick or their fourth pick.
Okay.
Sorry.
Round 4. Okay. I'm flipping the switch a bit. We're going from a very intense home invasion to, I think it's still intense and definitely scary, but it's fun. Kind of going along with Claire's pick for Scream. This was sort of a sort of Scream for the 2000s, and that is Final Destination. Love Final Destination. That's about to turn 25 in a couple months. I'll talk about that on my show. And within the 2000s, from 2000 to 2009, I believe, there were 4 Final Destination films. So very successful, very popular franchise. I know we have a 6th one coming out, I guess, in the next year or two. But Final Destination stars the one and only Devon Sawa, who's like really having a resurgence with Chucky and different horror stuff that he's doing. But talk about a franchise, but especially this first film and the second film, completely taking over pop culture. I think most people, at least a lot of people I know or follow or am friends with, when you're on the highway and you see a truck with like logs or with anything like carrying anything that could like just snap and just come and kill you and just hit your car, I think everyone thinks of Final Destination 2. That opening is amazing on the highway. But the first one, a plane crash where this teen has a premonition and sees it all happen before it actually happens, and then death comes after the few that got off the plane that are trying to survive. It's just so brilliant. Like I said, it's fun. It gets gross. It's definitely shocking. It is so tense, but it's a roller coaster ride, and which is fitting because the third one takes place on a roller coaster. It's great set pieces, very clever. It really takes you on a ride because sometimes you're like, oh God, it's going to be that thing that kills him. And actually, it's something else completely, And it has a great cameo from the one and only Candyman, Tony Todd, who R.I.P. just passed away.
Please mention
recently.
Tony Todd.
Oh, yeah. And he's got a really fun role. He pops up not in every single Final Destination film, but a lot of them. He's like this coroner, this morgue worker working on the bodies and knows a lot about death. But yeah, and Ali Larter, you got Sean William Scott, one of my 90s crushes, amen, and 2000. Kerr Smith from Dawson's Creek. You got a lot of good, teen heartthrob people in this cast, and I just love it. It's so fun to, especially if you've never seen it before. The first time you see these movies, how are they going to die? Who's going to die? What's the order? Are they skipping the order? Because you can, do things where you can sort of cheat death, at least on your round. I love it so much. It's a fun thrill ride. So Final Destination is my pick for round 4.
That's a really good pick.
Thanks.
It's a really good
just
pick.
So much fun. It was between that and Paranormal Activity because that was also hugely popular.
Oh, gosh.
But I was like, that's great. But Final Destination, man, that is just electric right there. So I had to give it some love,
I think it's because of Final Destination for the longest time, and maybe still a little bit, I won't get LASIK because of that
Amen, Claire.
moment.
Thank you. Thank you. I am right there with you. I'm like, you know what? Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to put in another contact lens, but then I think of that scene. I think it was in maybe the fourth or
I
fifth
think it was
film.
4. Yeah.
Okay.
4 or 5.
Right? Where I'm like, oh, I already was freaked out by it. I saw Clockwork Orange with like the, Malcolm McDowell's eye. And then seeing that, I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't think it's not going to happen for
It's
me.
not for me.
Yeah. Yep.
Totally irrational fear that I have now. Same
You know
thing
what?
with the logs on the back of a truck.
I believe it. Any of that could happen. So be careful, everyone.
All right. Team 90s, you're up with your fourth pick.
Awesome. Okay, so my last picks have proven that 90s had many critically acclaimed horror movies for that decade. But you know what? It's the 90s. And the 90s also knows how to have a fun time, especially with horror, because it's called having range. And my next pick hits a multitude of subgenres. You've got horror action, you've got horror rom-com, you've got creature feature. It is one of, I think, the very few successful dark universe movies. And so, like the bumper sticker says, honk if you'd rather be watching the 1999 cinematic masterpiece, The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz.
Oh my God, Claire, this is
Okay.
amazing. I was not thinking of this. Okay, yeah, love it. All right,
I
continue.
know. But yes, as a child, this movie terrified me. I have like a very vivid memory of being in a room with kids and they were watching it, and I literally went in the other room because I was like, "This is not for me. Can't stand this." It's got flesh-eating scarabs. The moment where the scarab is crawling under the man's skin, truly terrifying. The mummy sucking the life out of people, drying them up. Terrible, awful. It's got creepy tombs and catacombs and death traps. But you know what? It's also so camp, which makes it so beloved. And that's the beautiful thing, is that it never takes itself too seriously. And we, I think, need more of that in horror. We need more horror comedies. I think of the scene especially when the mummy screams and Rick screams right back at him. Just
Yep.
love that moment so much. It's got a star-studded cast. We've got Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, as I mentioned. They also have insane chemistry on screen. Love those two together. Kevin J. O'Connor, who plays Benny Gabor. There's like a clip going around on social media right now that's someone was like, the best part in The Mummy is when Benny prays to every deity when he's like pulling out all the different necklaces. And that's like the funniest thing that's ever happened in cinema. Totally agree. Another great quote that also circulates often is, looks to me like you're on the wrong side of the river.
Yes.
Great moment. And I think it's just like the fact that it's still talked about today shows that it's timeless and culturally relevant. Like, it never ages. So that's my pick.
Wow. Good pick. And you're right. I talked about that on my show this year, and people still love it so much because it turned 25 this year. And I feel like it's just as popular as it was 25 years ago. Totally. And Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz. Oh my God. Beautiful. Yeah.
I actually seen both of these movies, but The Mummy,
Woo!
I don't remember much from it. I was really young.
Okay.
Watching, and it was on TV. And then Final Destination, a friend forced me to watch this one too. Yeah, same friend too.
Oh my gosh, your friend. Your friend is just pressuring you, just like, we're doing it. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, check out The Mummy again. It's a really fun rewatch. Oh yeah, it holds up really well.
It's so fun. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do.
It's Jonathan Hyde. I love Jonathan Hyde, and he's in this movie. It has a very good cast.
Yeah, good cast. Lots of good supporting people. Yeah, and they're all so pretty. And yeah, you know, there are definitely a few moments in The Mummy, because I wouldn't call it horror personally, even though it's got obviously horrifying kind of like theme and story, you know, in the classic Mummy. But there are a couple scenes that really do kind of, you know, give you the goosebumps. You know, there's a really cool sequence with an actor, Tuck Watkins, playing a guy that loses his glasses, and things are happening in the dark.
Again, why I'm like, should I get LASIK? But I don't know.
Right? Yeah, it's funny how these movies are like, yeah, you should. No, you shouldn't.
No, you shouldn't.
But yeah, there's definitely a couple really great, creepy moments, really to make your skin crawl in The Mummy, for sure. Love it. But Final Destination, really, I mean, can't go wrong with like things shooting out of nowhere, killing you, and things falling, and you know, I just love it so much.
The sequence with the teacher, especially, like I
Oh,
won't say what
at
happens, but
home.
like her whole, like the whole, it's like so
Absolutely.
masterfully put together, I'd have to say.
Absolutely. Yes, Claire. I know that scene always gets me, and there's a train scene, and
Oh my God, yeah.
it's truly like, it makes your jaw drop. It's just so good, and the ending's fun, and yeah, I love it. It's you know what's actually really cool? We both just kind of talked about like sort of like a little bit of like fantasy horror in a way.
Mm.
You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
both are kind of similar in that way, where it's like some supernatural horror, you know, where like it's not to really, you know, go into obviously seriously, and it's sort of like you know, just kind of like not real fantastical stuff going on, but it's still
Totally.
super great and entertaining, you know.
And The
Yeah.
Mummy 2 had was amazing as well. You know,
Mhm.
I know it didn't
Yeah.
come out in the 90s, but it's still a
Mummy
great sequel.
Returns. Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. I want another one. I want them to come back, please.
With the Final Destination, I remember one scene, but I don't remember if it was in the first or second, where there's like pictures that were taken of students, and then the pictures predict how they die.
Yeah.
Is that the
I think that's
same?
2.
That might be
Okay.
2. It's tough because that might happen in a few of them actually, but yeah, I feel like if I'm remembering correctly, I think there's a character that has them on a wall in
Yeah.
2. If I'm right, yeah.
Okay, so that's the
I
second
know. I
one.
want to
Okay.
rewatch them all. I
I know, I'm
think
like, is
so.
it 2 or 3? Is it with
I
the
know, right? I
'cause
don't
I
think
think
it's
it
1.
I'm wondering
Right.
if it's because of the roller coaster now, 'cause they're
It
just
might
taking
be the roller
pictures.
coaster, yeah, or I feel like, oh man, I want to say it, but I don't want to spoil. But there's a character who's in an asylum in 2, and I feel like she
Mm.
has some stuff on the walls, but I can't remember if they're pictures. I don't know. Maybe it is
Hmm.
3. But either way, there's
Yeah.
there's always a little bit of something, like, you know, people are making lists or looking at pictures, or you know,
Yeah,
in
I
those movies
remember
to try to
that.
find out.
And
Yeah.
in recent times, I've been going back and watching Goosebumps and reading Goosebumps. And there's a one with Say Cheese and Die, and I just made the connection to that
Yeah.
one.
I love Goosebumps.
And
Oh
the new
god.
Same.
Goosebumps that came out, I think, a year ago or 2 years ago, kind of reminds me of Final Destination, the one that came
Oh,
out
cool.
on Disney
Okay.
Plus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with Justin Long, I
Mhm.
think, right? Is
Yes.
Justin
Yeah.
Oh,
Long in it?
yeah.
Yeah. I gotta check it out, because then I know the new season starts soon with David Schwimmer. So
Yes.
Mhm.
now, can you tell me, Shalina, the first season of the new one, is it all from one book, or is it kind of like the old Goosebumps, where like each episode is a different story? Do you know? Do you remember?
So with this one, it draws on various books. So it's the
Okay.
same main cast in each episode, but the
Okay.
storyline mixes the different
Oh, cool.
books, which is very
Okay.
creative. I liked how they did
That's
that.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the old one was much like Are You Afraid of the Dark, where it was sort of like just story of the week. That's it. Move
Yeah.
on, right?
Yeah.
So good.
So
Cool.
okay. So we'll do final round, and then we'll do your honorable mentions as like the bonus round. So
Cool.
round 5, it is Team 90's turn.
All right. So I started with a top tier heavy hitter at the very beginning, and I'm ending with a top tier heavy hitter. So there are some horror movies that are so amazing that they almost feel real. But there's really only one horror movie that audiences actually believed was real. And that movie was The Blair Witch Project. Also 1999. 1999 had like some
99.
incredible.
Yeah.
It was like the
amazing
year for
Mhm.
horror. But yes, this movie set the standard for horror found footage that really no other found footage movie has been able to replicate since. And I think it's all thanks to this movie coming out at a time in the late 90s when the internet was just taking off, so they could be a little bit more experimental, do some new things that we in the year of 2024, we would know immediately that these instances, this movie is not meant to be real. But this movie in particular had one of the first theatrical it was one of the first theatrical features to get a viral marketing campaign. And that campaign claimed that the 3 main characters had really gone on a trip into the woods to shoot a documentary, and they were never seen again, save for this found footage. They created a website that included detailed reports of this search and reactions from family members and expert opinions, all of that. It went so deep that the three actors themselves, Heather, Mike, and Josh, hid from the public and were listed as missing, presumed dead on IMDb. That's how layered this marketing was.
Whoa.
And the entire mythology of the Blair Witch completely made up. That they just made that whole thing up, but everybody thought it was real because it was so good. And yeah, like I said, there's no way you could do any of this today. But the reason for it coming out in the late 90s, I think it was just in this like perfect bubble of time where they could get away with it. It was also incredibly successful. It had a $60,000 budget and made nearly $250 million worldwide.
Wow.
So yeah, they really made their money back on this. It's a movie. It's that's so successful that this year it was re-released in the way that the filmmakers intended, and essentially in its like purest form. So it's still very, very much relevant. And when you look into how this movie was made, it's very impressive. Questionable, probably, but also still very impressive. There was no script. They basically like had an outline. So all of the dialogue was improvised. They sent the three actors into the woods with supplies that included walkie-talkies, a GPS, and then basically like instructions for the day's shoot. So each actor had like a secret message for what they were supposed to act out in this particular scene. Some of the scenes were entirely unscripted. So the scene where the tent shakes on the outside, that was the director, but the actors didn't know that was going to happen. So that was their genuine reactions. And a lot of the reactions from the actors were real because they were getting more and more distraught as filming went on. Again, maybe questionable. Maybe you shouldn't do that, but we got a great product out of it. And you don't see a lot in the movie, but I think it's what you don't see that makes it more terrifying, because really what's scarier than getting lost in the woods? We all just have that like fear of getting lost and not finding your way and all of that. I think it does a great job of putting you in the same psychological state as the characters themselves. So many unsettling parts. The hanging stick figures, when they come across that in the woods, truly terrifying. There's a bundle of human things that is left outside of a tent that is also scary. There's a part where they just basically walk in a circle for the entire day and end up in the same spot where they started from, which you would think, okay, that's not scary, but like you're just in that mindset with them at that point. And then the end also, I guess I shouldn't spoil it, but it's a very dramatic, quick ending. I'll say that, where all of a sudden you're like, wait, what? And then it's over. So that is my pick.
Okay.
Nice.
I didn't know that it was fake until now.
Really? Oh wow.
Wait, what?
What?
I didn't know it was fake. I thought it was real. Like I remember the lore
Wow.
behind it when it first came out.
Yeah.
Like
So
I
wow.
I-
Okay. Literally, right now you learned that was all just
fake.
marketing.
Yes.
Wow,
Oh my God.
Shelina, oh my gosh, that's how do you feel?
I'm sorry to like burst the bubble.
No, that's fine. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll check it out because it's not real.
That's so funny. Yeah, they were in the news this year for the anniversary, the actors, because the actors have infamously gotten very little money from it. So I'm
Right.
surprised you didn't hear that. Oh yeah, they've been in the news for years. Every now and then there were lawsuits because
Mhm.
Lionsgate like basically tried to say they owned their names. So it's
Yeah.
actually kind of gross how they've been treated. I mean, it was a non-union film and they agreed to make, the little money they did, like Claire was saying, it was a low budget. But yeah, all those millions, the actors have not gotten much of that at
Oh,
all.
dang.
So yeah, lots of but I guess they have started to like kind of reach a common ground, and maybe something could happen where they could get maybe some residuals, because I know they want to reboot it and do a new sequel. So
Right.
yeah, good pick.
Okay.
That's an iconic one. And how funny. All right, you guys ready for my pick?
Yes.
How funny, Claire, because you just talked about a found footage film, and I have a found footage film for my pick for round 5. Perfect. This is a movie I saw in the theater 3 times, and I'm not usually like that. I might go twice sometimes, but 3 times. Cloverfield. Found footage monster movie. I was like, okay, I can't just have slashers and ghosts. I gotta get a monster in here somewhere. And I thought, nothing bigger than a 2000s monster than Cloverfield. Produced by J.J. Abrams. Talk about really viral, very fascinating marketing. Found footage movie set in New York City with a bunch of friends having a party, and all of a sudden, there are some definitely comparisons and visual allusions to 9/11, which made it feel really intense and disturbing, how the city is crumbling and things are going very wrong. But here comes this big alien monster thing, very Godzilla-like, and it's all found footage. It's all phones or video digital cameras at the time, and they're trying to survive. They go into the subway. They're going from building to building. There's not only the big monster, but there are these little creepy critters, very like alien-like from the Alien movies. The face huggers, which they do some major damage as well. There's a body count. People are dying left and right. Directed by Matt Reeves, who went on to do a lot of great Planet of the Apes movies, and he just did the Batman movie with Robert Pattinson, which was great. Written by Drew Goddard, who went on to work on The Cabin in the Woods, which is another iconic 2000s horror film. So some really great talent in front of and behind the camera. But I was on the edge of my seat. I was hooked. And there's a very interesting ending to the movie where if you squint, you kind of see something that people were whispering about. They were like, wait, does that have something to do with what went on? So lots of good chatter and theories about this movie, since it is, an alien monster movie. Like, where did it come from? How did it get so big? All that good stuff. So yeah, how funny. We both had found footage picks that I feel like were very iconic for the separate decades. I mean,
they really were. I did see Cloverfield in theaters. Like, right? I was so hyped to go see that movie. And I remember people being like so nauseous because especially like the camera was so like all over the place. But it didn't bother me. I was fine.
Yeah. And especially after, seeing Blair Witch, and there were other found footage things, you get used to it if you have seen that stuff. But yeah, the marketing, and how funny these found footage movies that had similar, really inventive, attention grabbing marketing, where this movie didn't, pretend the cast really died or anything, but you didn't know the title until the movie was coming out. For a while, I think they would just call it like a fake name. And for a while, like in the industry, it was just like Untitled J.J. Abrams Monster Project. And it's like, what is that? So there was a lot of mystery, and the teasers were super short. I just thought that was so brilliant. And it really, paid off because it made a lot of money and started a franchise in its own right. The sequel's awesome. The third movie that dropped on Netflix one year after the Super Bowl, I was so excited. Oh my God, it's terrible. Oh my God, it's so bad. But the second one with John Goodman and Mary Elizabeth Winstead. God, wow. Yeah, I haven't seen that since theaters. I got to rewatch that sometime. So I remember I saw it first with a date, second with my friends, and they couldn't look. I was like, you have to watch. Take your hands away from your eyes. Watch this part. And then third with my family. I'm like, I got to go back. You guys got to. I was like seeing it with anyone I knew. So yeah, I love Cloverfield. Yeah. So there you go.
But I do feel like we would not have Cloverfield if it wasn't for Blair Witch just like really knocking it out of the park with the found footage aspect. And I think every studio at that point was like, oh my God, what can we do to have that success? Like you mentioned Paranormal Activity, which I for better or worse love that franchise.
Oh yeah.
And I think like that was so successful too.
Totally. Oh yeah, Paranormal was for sure inspired by Blair Witch. And you're right, Cloverfield I'm sure was too, because Cloverfield really is like Blair Witch meets Godzilla.
It stars Lizzie Kaplan, who was just love her.
Of course, yes, she had done Mean Girls, but she wasn't like super huge like she is now. Yeah. You're right. That was really helping her climb up, Yeah, really good cast. Very, very attractive people running through the streets of New York. What's not to love, right?
Nice.
So yeah, Cloverfield.
I haven't seen any of them, but maybe I'll check out Cloverfield because you were saying that it's not only horror, but it has like action and comedy. So maybe it'll draw me in.
It'll freak you out. It'll freak you out a bit here and there, but it's a really good, like, again, kind of a slow burn. You really meet the friends for a while, a lot of good banter, and then it's like, oh wait, yeah, I forgot I'm like watching like an action thriller horror movie. Oh God, so yeah, check it out. It's so fun. And it's heavy, like I said, like it kind of is, I don't know, like, I wasn't there that day, but it sort of feels like, wow, was this what 9/11 was like? So there is some real, terror for sure there,
Mhm.
but
Interesting.
luckily because it's an alien monster, we can have fun. So yeah.
And you should
And
watch Blair Witch because you
yeah, I
thought it
was
was
gonna
real,
say that.
so then
That's what I
you
was gonna
My
can.
say
gosh,
too.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm like,
totally.
okay, maybe I'll check this out because it's not
So
real.
yeah, when I so in '99, I feel like I was so lucky. Did you see Blair Witch in the theater, Claire?
No, I would have been 9. I was way too young.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're younger than me. I saw it in the theater with my friends, and we believed the hype. We believed that it was real because the marketing was so genius. Many people say that the marketing is better than the movie. I still
Mhm.
love the movie and I love the acting. I mean, some of those the actors sometimes get a little bit of hate, like, oh, they're just screaming and crying, but it's like, no, they
But
are,
that's
like Claire
what
was
you would
saying, like,
do.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like some of that was not scripted. Like some of that they really were being terrified, and the snot in that famous
Oh,
shot, that then
yes.
Scary Movie spoofed so hilariously with Sherry O'Terry. But yeah, we saw it at the theater because there was a special that I think aired on the Sci-Fi Channel back then with, I can't believe they got away with this, with actors pretending to be the family members of the missing
Oh
people in the dock.
no.
So it's like, yeah, I'm Heather's
Ethics.
brother, and we've been looking exact. I'm like, my God, this would never fly today. So here I am, a kid. I was, I think, around 12. And I'm like, oh my God, this is sick and twisted. I can't believe it. I got to see this documentary. Everyone thought it was a documentary. So,
Yeah.
oh my God, brilliant. And like, and I was reading, and there's a really good book if you guys ever want to read it. I talk about it on my show a lot, especially this year for 1999 movies, but it's called Best Movie Year Ever. I think the
Mm.
subtitle is, I should go grab it. It's in the other room, but how 1999 was like an amazing year for film. And in that book, there's a chapter all about Blair Witch and how, yeah, like the studio kind of made the actors like kind of go into hiding and say, no, you're dead. So like you can't go to the
Oh
premiere.
my
You
God.
can't, like,
Yeah, they
they
couldn't get any
say
work.
they couldn't get any work. Yeah. And like they had to like fight for their identities. And I think there was
Wow.
even a paragraph where like they were actually in like a hotel room looking out across the street at a screening happening of the film,
Wow.
seeing
Wow.
people come out reacting, and they're like, man, this is kind of weird that we like can't be there. Like this is supposed to be our big break. So the marketing obviously made a lot of sense and made us all so intrigued, but it really is kind of awful how those poor actors were treated. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
Hmm.
double-edged sword,
totally.
So yeah,
Wow.
love these two movies.
Could not get away with I mean, they
No.
would like I think they intentionally like lowered their food like supply every day just to like get them into an aggravated state. I think at one
Wow.
point the actors were so fed up that they just like abandoned their post and they walked up to a house and they were like, "Can we use your phone?" Like because their like tent it was raining and their tent had like fallen apart and
Wow.
I mean, they
Oh,
couldn't
snap.
do this today.
Yeah.
It
Luckily,
was
I don't think
such
any of
a
that.
crazy time.
I don't think any of that was happening on Cloverfield. I think it was bigger
Yeah.
budget, and they're like, no, this is a movie. You guys can go home tonight. It's fine,
Yeah, you
right?
guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
actually have to sleep in this decrepit building.
Right. Right. Oh
Dang.
God. Yeah. Yeah, it's
Interesting.
a great
so
double feature,
iconic.
Shalina. You
Yeah.
could totally watch Blair Witch and then Cloverfield, and as long as your stomach can handle some, running with the camera, kind of dizzying shots, that could be a really fun double feature.
I'll eat some gravel before I watch it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll do a honorable mention round. So if you have an extra movie that you would like to share, who just went first? I just lost count. 90s went first. Okay, so Mark, you
Okay.
could go first.
I'll go first.
For,
Okay.
honorable
Thank you.
mention.
Yeah. I had said to Shalina, like, should it be, I've heard some of the episodes, should it be like one movie at a time, or could it be like a whole like subgenre of movies? Because there are so many to talk about. So, and it's so funny, guys. I had a couple ideas of a movie to talk about for this honorable mention round, but I literally just changed my mind a few minutes ago, and I have one that I really love. So that's just goes to show how many great top tier horror options there were for us in the 2000s. The honorable mention I'm going with is, it's another remake. It was the decade of remakes, sorry. But this remake, wow, it opened my eyes. I had seen the original, but in bits and pieces. So this remake was sort of fresh for me. And it made me go back to the original, which was 10 years prior. They actually remade the movie kind of like around the 10th anniversary of the original film. It's an American remake of a foreign film, but the same writer-director. Michael Haneke from Austria made Funny Games. Another Naomi Watts horror remake. She was kind of the horror remake queen there for a while. If you call King Kong horror, which it's not, but it could be, it's scary and, there's death. But Funny Games, it came out in another 2008 horror film a couple months before The Strangers. I was floored. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out. It is very disturbing. It really showed me, back then I was in college, so I was like, I wasn't a filmmaker yet, but I had worked on things, and it just really showed me how restraint and not showing the audience every single thing and letting them hear things and letting them think of what's happening can be way more powerful than showing the gore, showing the violence. And there is violence, but basically it takes the original from the late 90s, which was, I believe, in Austria. It moves it now to the Hamptons. So everything is very nice and white and bright. Naomi Watts and Tim Roth have this beautiful home, all white walls that will be covered in blood in a few short hours. And they're a family that are there for the long weekend. And these two attractive guys, all in white, very preppy, very like tennis playing, Hamptons Richies come in and they don't leave. And their simple, polite questions suddenly turn into another home invasion. Sorry. And it really plays with the audience because there's, bleak, dark stuff, but it is so well made. So Funny Games is my honorable mention for the 2000s.
How about you, Claire?
Do I get one? I can just pick one. That's fine. I have others, but I can narrow it down to one.
Yeah, let's keep it to one.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's tough. I know. I could list them all off. Yeah.
God, this is so hard. Okay, I'm gonna go with a movie that I watched for the first time this year. Every year I do 31 days of scary movies for October, and so this one I added to the list because I'd never seen it before. I watched Candyman for the first time.
Yeah.
So good. Rest in peace, Tony Todd. Gosh, it was such a loss to have him leave us. But Candyman, so freaking iconic, a great movie villain, really just like an incredible story. Love how it comes together. Very eerie. Like Tony Todd just like embodies that character so much of Candyman. He has such a like deep, like soothing voice, but he's such like this sinister presence. I think the film also taps into a lot of interesting themes around gentrification and racism and all of that. It just really was so shocking and like great to watch. I think it highly recommend checking that movie out.
Yes, good pick, Claire. And it goes back to my Tony Todd mention. I love that movie. So did you see it for the first time recently?
Yes, this year in October.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah. What a good one. Now you got to watch the like legacy sequel that came out a couple years ago.
Yes, I do want to watch that one.
It's pretty interesting, and they tied in.
I think Jordan
nicely.
Peele didn't direct it, but he
produced it, I believe.
Behind it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's spooky for sure. Yeah. Good one.
Nice.
Should we list off the other ones we wanted to talk about real quick? The other honorable mentions?
Can I just name the titles? That's all I want to do.
What do you think, Shalita?
Sure, go ahead.
During this free period?
Mark, you can go first.
Okay, I'm just gonna list a few. You can't really see, but I had like so many guys. But
wow.
For my bonus, I was kind of thinking of, much like how I just picked Funny Games, sort of like, elevated horror, adult horror, like horror that was more than just kind of fun, obvious stuff, like stuff that really made you think or like was unsettling. So some ones I want to shout out, The Cell with Jennifer Lopez. That was a really very interesting, beautiful, artistic horror film directed by Tarsem. I mentioned earlier that like international horror was really becoming more well known in the States and in North America. So High Tension from Alejandro Aja, I think. He's French. High Tension is a brutal, scary movie. That was a big one. 28 Days Later. That's a very iconic Danny Boyle.
Yeah.
That really kickstarted Cillian Murphy, right? American Psycho, another one from 2000, about to turn 25. Christian Bale, all the muscles and all the blood. My God. So, and like I mentioned earlier, the other. So those are just some, but I just had to shout out like some really I don't want to say smart horror, because I think all horror is really interesting and clever, even if it's silly. It's still like, saying more than maybe some other films, but at least really groundbreaking. Oh, and The Descent. Did you guys, Claire, have you seen The
God,
Descent?
yes, I've seen that.
That sounds
Another-
familiar. I have to look that up.
God, oh my God.
Shalina, I
like,
don't know if you're ready for that.
That's a really intense one in a cave.
We need someone in the room for that one.
Okay.
Right? I think it might be Australian, but and Wolf Creek, another Australian horror. I mean, I could go on, guys. And there are some movies I still haven't seen. I know people love Martyrs. I've never seen it. I'm too scared because I think it's really gross. But anyway, yeah, we just were really getting things were really people were pushing the boundaries with some horror in the 2000s for sure. So those are just some, of the other bonus ones I wanted to say. But Claire, what did you have on your bonus list?
Well, I also had 2 movies from Stephen King that I tossed in between. I ended up not going with either of them, but Misery as one,
yeah.
and It, the original It, with my gosh, what is his
Tim
name?
Curry.
Tim Curry, thank you.
Icon,
Yes,
yeah.
so
Good
good.
picks.
I also had Sleepy Hollow.
I just talked about it on my pod. I love Sleepy Hollow, Claire. Oh my God,
I love
it so
Sleepy
much.
Hollow. It's one of my favorite movies to
So
watch
good.
during Halloween time. Another movie I watched for the first time this year, Interview with the Vampire.
Oh my! You're
also
speaking my
very
language.
good.
I literally last night just recorded about Interview with the Vampire. That'll be out
Oh my
soon. But
gosh.
it's another, I'm loving the like gothic horror that you're talking about right now between Sleepy and
Yes.
Interview. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Good picks.
Yep. Very, very fun year. So many others, but I won't leave it at that.
I'll throw in honorable mentions here. The Haunting, that came out in 1999.
Yeah. Mhm,
I remember
was a big
seeing
one.
that with my cousins in our basement. That was scary.
Yep.
And for 2000, Dead Silence. It was like the
Is that the one with like the doll, the dummy?
yes, the dummy. Yeah.
My gosh, Shalina, you've seen a movie I haven't seen. I haven't seen Dead
Me
Silence
too.
yet.
I haven't seen Dead Silence.
Wow. Okay, so we all have homework. Shalina, you have lots of
Yes.
homework, but Claire and I
Yes.
have to watch Dead Silence. So funny you bring it up,
Okay.
because every like October especially, I think about that movie. I'm like, I still haven't seen that. I got to see it because I think it's James Wan who did Saw, but it's like rarely streaming. But that's a good one, Shalina. You like it?
Thank you.
Nice.
It freaked me out, but
Yeah.
that one has a cool twist at the end as well.
Okay,
That
cool.
like
I
looking
gotta check
back,
it
I'm
out.
like, oh, that was clever. And then one
okay.
more from 2000s. I can't remember what it's called, but I know Frankie Muniz is in it.
Is it Stay
uh,
Alive?
Yes,
Video
the
game
video
one?
game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah. That's it for me. I don't remember much from it, but I did see it, but I was probably under the
2000s, I mean,
covers.
I don't want to talk your ear off, but I mean, we could even just do a whole show just on the 2000s remakes, because there was Texas Chainsaw, there was The Hills Have Eyes was really good. I mean, wow, just so much. Horror was just, they were just throwing them out
Yeah.
every week, House of Wax with Paris Hilton. Oh my God, I love,
Oh, I do love House
that-
of Wax.
That would
Yes.
be yes.
right? That was actually really good, and totally not at all really like the original with Vincent Price, but I like both versions very much. Very different.
Nice.
So yeah.
Well, this was a lot of fun. Before we end the episode, I'll give you guys the space to do your closing statements to get the listeners on your side with the votes. Team 2000s, you're first with your closing statement.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, as you can tell, I can talk about horror any day, any week. You let me know. 90s were amazing. Any horror is good horror, but I'm here to rep the 2000s, and like I've been saying, I feel like the 2000s took what the 90s gave us and cranked the volume up to 10 and just gave us more blood if that was your thing, more intensity if that was your thing, more fun. Everything was just cranked up. And so I as a horror kid, a teen in the 2000s, I mean, I had so many options and I was just so grateful. 90s, really some groundbreaking stuff, but it's not like it was hugely popular where like I could go like once a month and see like a hit horror movie. So the 2000s, they answered my personal prayers of give me more scary stuff. So that's my final thought. Go 2000s.
Well, I just want to start by saying thank you, Shalina, for being an amazing host. You're
Thank you.
incredible. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mark, for being Okay, yeah. Thank you, Mark, for being a great opponent.
Oh gosh,
It
thank
was
you.
so much fun to like go back and forth on all of these movies.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want to thank the listeners for going on this nostalgic journey with me. Mark, I totally hear you that the 2000s like really ramped up the horror tenfold. Like, and there are some really great picks from that decade. I think for me personally, it's not always about the quantity, but the quality, right? You want to make sure that you're really hitting it each and every single time as much as you possibly can. And I feel like the picks that I presented you guys with represent the best of the best, not just in terms of 90s horror movies, but horror movies of all time. And this decade really had something for every horror fan. As I mentioned, a successful, very successful slasher franchise, critically acclaimed masterpieces, guys. This proved that horror could have a seat at the table at the Oscars table. But camp classics because horror knows how to have a fun time. But then we also had these influential game changers that we can see even into the 2000s and 2010s and 2020s, and we will see it even beyond that. As I mentioned in my opening statement, and as we've discussed, very hard to narrow down this list. I would have loved to have included so many others. So I'm very, very happy that we got to have some honorable mentions that we discussed. And I think as I've proven here today, the 90s set a very high bar for horror films that I think very few have been able to reach since. And I think it's because of the 90s paving the way and setting the precedent that we have so much of the horror movies we know and love today. So let's always give some love back to the 90s for doing the thing.
All right. Yay. Good job, both of you.
Yay!
Love it.
All
Honestly,
right.
like the 90s and 2000s, we were getting
Oh my
great,
God.
great
We
horror.
were just eating it up. I mean,
Eating it up.
so many great options.
Well, now it's the listeners' turn, so be sure to vote on which decade you think gave us the best horror movies. So, real quick, I'll do a recap. So, round one was Scream versus Saw. Round two, The Ring versus The Silence of the Lambs. Round three, The Sixth Sense versus The Strangers. Round four, Final Destination versus The Mummy. And round five, The Blair Witch Project versus Cloverfield. You have 1 week to vote. And this year, the voting is taking place on Spotify. So make sure you check out the polls. And good luck to both of you. Before you go, I'll give you guys the floor to share your handles with my listeners so they could check out your podcasts.
Go first, Claire.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Again, thanks so much for having me. I'm Claire of Why the Flick, where, as Shalina mentioned, we watch a new movie each episode and ask ourselves, why the flick did we watch this? We have also some very fun segments that we do at the end of the episodes. Shalina's been on before.
Yes,
we talked
Free
about
Willy.
Free Willy. Free Willy.
Love it. Love it.
Classic. It's like 90s movie. Very, very fun. So yes. And then you can also listen to Why the Flick wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Spotify, Apple, pretty much anywhere. And then you can also follow at Why the Flick on social. We are on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Letterboxd.
Nice. And yeah, you can follow me at Release Date Rewind on Instagram. And like Claire was saying, my pod is basically wherever you get your pods. It's part of Straw Hut Media Network, and it's on YouTube as well. If you'd rather watch the show, you can watch us, or you can listen on whatever favorite pod app you have. But yeah, my show, like Shalina was saying, milestone anniversaries. So for November, we did Sleepy Hollow, we did A Nightmare on Elm Street, I did a little Brad Pitt double feature with Interview with the Vampire from November and Fight Club from October. So any movies that are having a milestone that are important to me, I like to bring a guest on and we chat about it. So you both have to come on sometime. We'll pick a movie together.
Yes.
That'd be so
Yes.
fun.
And vice versa.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you want to see what I'm up to on the film side, my Instagram handle is at MJPPOV. That's my production company. So I make shorts, either my own or for other people. So you can see kind of behind the scenes stuff over there and find my films online. And I think that's basically it. Thank you.
Cool.
This was so fun.
Awesome.
And I feel like I'm remembering, maybe because of the nostalgia from this topic, I'm remembering like American Idol back in the day where they'd be like, all right, is it going to be 90s or 2000s? And we're there like, remember how like everyone they had like their digit, for the phone call back then,
Yes.
back in the day. So they'd be like, two,
Literally, I was thinking of
right?
American Idol when she was like, it's time to vote. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having such a throwback.
Right? I know everyone's like going to their phones and then like we're like, yeah, me. Right?
God, I remember that. Oh my gosh.
Right?
Memory
It was so
unlocked.
exciting. Uh-huh.
It's so funny. Wow. All right. Well, listeners, thank you for joining us today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends, fellow 90s kid. And thank you again so much for your support. Take care.